Welcome to Mastering Life's Adventures, an educational podcast about tapping into your true self, the soul, the substance of your life, to discover what life's ups and downs are really about, and how to have a greater sense of purpose, peace, joy, and fulfillment. I am Dr. Judith Holder, your host, coach, psychologist, fellow seeker who enjoys diving into the connections between spirituality, psychology, wellness, and your everyday life's adventures. All preparing and polishing you like the facets of a magnificent diamond to be your best self. If you're craving more from your life, you are in the right place. Come, let's journey together and transforming what you know into who you really are. Mastering Life's Adventures begins now.
Some patterns you keep trying to change are not habits. They are childhood rules you are still afraid to break, or didn't know you could break them. You may have learned you should never disappoint anyone, ask for too much, let people see you struggle, or become more successful than the people you love. You may have learned that family pain should remain private, that good women should always be available, or that changing too much might make the people closest to you uncomfortable. You may not remember choosing any of these rules, yet they may still be shaping how you work, whom you trust, what you tolerate, and how much of yourself you permit to enter your own life. Hi, I'm back with another key to soul progress. And today, we are exploring the rules you are still living by, even though you never consciously chose them. Every family has visible rules. You may have been expected to finish your homework before watching television, call if you were going to be late, or even your shoes off before entering the house. But families also have invisible rules. And these rules are rarely written down or spoken directly. You learn them by paying attention to what happens around you. You notice what earns affection. You notice what creates tension. You notice which feelings are welcome and which feelings make everyone uncomfortable. You notice who is permitted to have needs and who is expected to remain strong. Then, without realizing it, you begin to adjust yourself. You learn how to behave in order to feel safe, remain connected, receive praise, or avoid rejection within your family. The difficult truth is that you can grow up, move away, build a career, create relationships, and become highly capable while still living according to the emotional rules of the house in which you were raised. The house may be gone, but the rules can remain. An unconscious rule is a conclusion you formed about what you must do or must never do in order to remain safe, valued, accepted, or loved. These rules do not simply sit quietly in your mind. They operate more like an invisible director behind the scenes of your life. And the director tells you when it is safe to speak and when you should remain silent. It tells you whom you are allowed to disappoint. It tells you how much success is enough, whether rest is responsible, and whether another person's unhappiness is something you must immediately repair. You may believe you are making an independent decision while an old voice is still whispering, "Do not say that. She will be upset. Just agree. Work a little harder. You cannot let them see you need help. This is not the time to think about yourself. These are all statements that are going on in the background of your mind at the unconscious or subconscious level. And you believe you are making an independent decision? Because these messages are so familiar, they may no longer sound like rules. They may sound like your personality. You may say that you are simply a giver, naturally independent, uncomfortable with conflict, or someone who has always been an overachiever. That may be partly true. However, it is also worth asking whether some of what you call your personality originally developed as protection. Perhaps being highly observant began as monitoring the moods of the adults around you. Perhaps being independent began as learning that help was unreliable. Perhaps being agreeable began with you discovered that honesty created tension. Perhaps achievement became important because success brought attention, security, or approval. This does not mean your strength or faults. It means that a genuine strength may have grown around an old wound or an unmet need or a want that couldn't be fulfilled. A quality can be real and still be overused. A gift can become a prison when you believe you are never allowed to put it down. This is the layer that occurs over the soul, the substance of your life, are these interactions, these unsaid rules that now the soul has to navigate in between. But if we're walking a spiritual path, we start to peel back the onion skin. And as we're peeling it back, we're realizing, is this really me? Or is this something that I grew up with? Do I still want it? Or can I make some changes and modifications in it now that I'm becoming conscious and intentional in my walk, in my life, day by day, and in the adventures of my life? So let's take Claire. And she's 42. She is the person people call when something needs to be handled. She remembers appointments, organizes family gatherings, checks on older relatives, and notices when someone has become unusually quiet. Before they have to ask, Claire is already reaching out. She's used to doing this behavior of helping, of serving, of giving. However, Claire learned something very early in life. Her mother was frequently overwhelmed. Her father worked long hours, and the emotional atmosphere of the household could change quickly. Claire discovered that things seemed to go more smoothly when she did not add another problem. She learned to complete her school work without being reminded. She learned to soothe herself when she was afraid. She learned not to ask for anything that might create additional stress. And most importantly, she learned how to say, "I'm okay," even when she was not. No one sat Claire down and told her that she was not allowed to have needs. The message arrived through small moments. She noticed the tired sigh when she asked for help. She noticed the frustrated response when she became emotional. She noticed how often she was praised for being mature and for never causing problems. Every compliment reinforced an invisible rule. A good girl makes life easier for everyone else. And as Claire grew older, the wording changed. but the rule remained. It became a good woman does not become a burden. Years later, Claire developed a health concern that required follow-up appointments and several changes to her routine. Her sister offered to accompany her to one of the appointments, but Claire immediately said she could handle it. A friend offered to bring dinner, and Claire told her not to bother. Her partner asked what she needed, and Claire answered, "Nothing, I'm fine." But Claire was not fine. She was frightened. She wanted company. She wanted someone else to take responsibility for one evening. She wanted permission to admit that she did not feel strong. Yet receiving help felt more uncomfortable than remaining exhausted. That is the power of the unconscious rule. It can make the very thing you need feel unsafe. Claire was not simply declining help. She was protecting an identity. She had spent decades being the woman who did not need anything, and accepting support felt like violating the terms of who she was allowed to be. And after one particular difficult appointment, Claire sat in her car and cried. She was not crying only because she was worried about her health. She was also crying how lonely it had become to be admired by being strong, while feeling unable to let anyone stand beside her. The overall had once helped her navigate an overwhelming household, but it was now keeping love at a distance. Claire's lesson was not that independence was wrong. Her lesson was that independence without receptivity can slowly become emotional exhaustion. She began with one small change. The next time her sister offered to drive her, Claire paused before giving her usual answer, and then she said, "Yes, I would actually appreciate that." Her sister did not resent her. The family did not collapse. Claire did not become helpless. She simply allowed herself to be accompanied. Sometimes soul growth begins in an ordinary sentence. "Yes, I could use some help." Childhood rules, or like an alarm system installed in a house many years ago. The system may have been necessary when there was a real threat. However, imagine that no one ever updates the settings. Years later, the alarm sounds when someone opens a window. It sounds when the wind moves a branch. It sounds when a trusted person enters through the front door. The alarm is not evil. It is outdated. Many emotional reactions work in a similar way that hinders the soul from making true connection with the essence of who you are, just not the personality, but that intuition of you to help you to know this is okay. I can accept this. I need to allow this person to be who they need to be. If they're offering, it seems valid, I'm going to say yes. If it doesn't, it seems like there's alternative motives, then you kind of ask more questions. But we have to change this wiring that we have had from childhood to adulthood. Otherwise, we stay stuck in the alarm system. And many emotional reactions work in a similar way. You consider saying no, and the alarm sounds. They will reject me. You think about changing direction, and the alarm warns. You are being irresponsible. You ask for support, and the alarm sounds and says, you are becoming a burden. You express disagreement, and once again, the alarm tells you, you are creating conflict. You may assume that danger is present, but a strong feeling is not always a reliable description of the present moment. Sometimes it's an old alarm responding to a new situation. The task is to examine it with compassion. You can ask, what was the response originally designed to protect? Is that danger still present? Does this rejection fit the woman I am today? At this stage in my life, I'm willing to look at this alarm system and reconfigure it if I need to. If we start and ask yourself the question, does this reaction fit the woman I am today? Or is my body responding to a rule that belonged to another time? Some invisible rules begin through personal childhood experiences. Others are passed from generation to generation. For example, a grandmother may have learned that financial security required avoiding all risk. A mother may have learned that a woman preserved a relationship by remaining quiet. A father may have learned that showing emotion was a weakness he could not afford. A family may have learned that survival required appearing respectful, working twice as hard, remaining private, or never giving anyone a reason to criticize them. These beliefs may have helped previous generations survive very difficult hardships. That history deserves respect. However, respect and repetition are not the same thing. You can honor the way your family survived without continuing every survival strategy they used. You can appreciate the road they walked without assuming you must stay on it when your soul is calling you in another direction. This is often where guilt appears. You may not feel that you are simply changing a behavior. You may feel that you are violating an unspoken family covenant. The rule may tell you that women in your family stay no matter what, that people like you choose security rather than creativity, that family pain should never be discussed, or that families must always come first, even when you disappear in the process. Questioning such a rule can feel like betrayal. But there is a difference between ending a pattern that no longer serves your family highest good. You may be the person through whom an old pattern finally becomes conscious. That is not always disloyalty. Sometimes it is sacred responsibility. We are here to grow. And when we can catch these family patterns or traditions or unwritten rules, and we can make a conscious decision to do something different, then we are actually not only helping ourselves, but we're helping others by paying it forward to help to shape a different way of being. There is a powerful spiritual pattern in the story of Exodus. The Israelites were released from physical bondage, but freedom did not immediately feel comfortable. They left Egypt, yet in the uncertainty of the wilderness, some began remembering the familiarity of what they had left behind. Bondage had been painful, but it had also been predictable. Freedom was sacred, but it required trust, courage, and the development of an entirely new identity. For a moment, imagine one of the unnamed women traveling with the Israelites. Let us call her Adina. She is not an additional Bible figure, more of an imaginative reflection on what one woman and that journey might have experienced. Adina had spent her life being told when to rise, when to work, where to stand, and what was expected of her. Then suddenly, she was free. No overseer who was giving her instructions. There was open land ahead and uncertainty in every direction. And on the first night, she may have looked into the darkness and wondered whether leaving had been a mistake. Not because bondage had been good, but because the familiar can feel safer than the unknown, even when the familiar has wounded us. Now imagine that Adina eventually reached a place where no one was forcing her to live as she had before. Yet every morning, she continued walking with the fear that she would be punished if she moved too slowly. No one was standing over her, but the old command remained inside her. She had left Egypt physically, but Egypt had not yet fully left her emotionally. Many of us live this way. We leave the childhood home, but continue obeying its rules. We leave the critical relationship, but continue speaking to ourselves in the other person's voice. We gain the freedom to rest, but feel guilty whenever we stop working. We enter relationships with safe people, but continue expecting abandonment. We become adults with choices, but still feel that we must ask invisible authorities for permission. This is the wilderness between bondage and inner freedom. The wilderness is the place where the old rules become visible, but the new way of living does not yet feel natural. This can be deeply confusing. You may say, I know I do not have to live this way anymore. Why am I still afraid? You may still be afraid because knowledge and embodiment are not the same thing. The mind can recognize freedom before the nervous system trusts it. You may need to practice freedom before freedom begins to feel like home. You may need to say no several times before saying no stops feeling cruel. You may need to receive support several times before receiving stops feeling weak. You may need to disappoint someone and discover that you are still worthy. You may need to survive another person's misunderstanding without immediately returning to the old version of yourself and you taking the blame when it wasn't your blame at all to take. The spiritual journey is not only about leaving Egypt. It is also about removing Egypt's rules from your inner life. The soul can become constricted because of these rules. And so you're feeling stifled, but your soul is feeling that same way too. And we have to look at these issues and look at what is an unwritten rule that I'm following. Do I need to continue? How would I want to change or modify this particular rule? Or do I need it at all? Let's take Renee. She's 50. And after a painful divorce and betrayal, the people around her often described her as courageous. She built her finances, moved into a new home, and created a life that felt stable and fully her own. However, Renee's fierce independence did not begin with the divorce. It began much earlier. As a child, Renee experienced the adults around her as inconsistent. Promises were made and forgotten. Plans changed without warning. People she depended on were sometimes emotionally unavailable. Renee quietly formed a rule. Never depend on anyone more than they depend on you. And that rule gave her a sense of control. And she became resourceful. She prepared for every possibility. She kept emergency money, solved her own problems, and rarely asked anyone twice. After the divorce, the rule became even stronger. Renee promised herself that she would never be caught off guard again. For several years, this belief seemed to protect her. Then she met someone kind. He was consistent, followed through, and did not pressure her. Yet, whenever the relationship became more serious, Renee found a reason to pull away. She focused on small flaws, delayed conversations, and told herself she was simply protecting her peace. One evening, they planned to attend an event together. He offered to pick her up, but Renee said she would meet him there. He smiled and gently said, "Do you ever let anyone do anything for you?" The question unsettled her, and Renee immediately became defensive. She told him that she had been taking care of herself for a long time. He nodded, and he said, "I know. I'm not trying to take that away from you." That sentence stayed with her. Later, Renee realized that she had been treating dependency as the opposite of strength. But healthy interdependency is not helplessness. It is the ability to remain whole while allowing another person to contribute. Renee's old rule had protected her from being unprepared, but it was also preventing her from experiencing trustworthy connection. Look at this. She had a childhood issue, which she learned how to cope with, making it an unwritten rule. Then as she grew in age, she put other rules on top of it, reinforcing the unwritten rule. And we don't realize these layers have an impact upon our soul progress and our movement forward, because it's as if the soul is shackled down. It's weighted down. And until we start to observe these unwritten rules, and that become now adult rules that we engage in, we continue to suppress the expansion of our soul. So her lesson, Renee's lesson, was not that she should trust everyone. That would not be wisdom, right? Her new commitment was more discerning. She decided that she would allow trust to grow where consistency, honesty, and mutual care were present. This distinction matters because rewriting the old rule does not mean becoming careless. Spiritual growth is not the abandonment of discernment. It is learning the difference between discernment and fear dressed up in intelligent language. Fear says, for example, never again. Discernment says, I will pay attention. Fear closes every door. Discernment pauses, looking enough to see who is knocking. Many people are familiar with the 4 agreements associated with Dom, Miguel, Ruiz. Be impeccable with your words. Do not take things personally. Do not make assumptions. And always do your best. These teachings become even more meaningful when we use them to examine the rules operating beneath our lives. Being impeccable with your word begins with noticing the absolute language you use about yourself. You may say, I always have to be the responsible one. I cannot disappoint my family. I am terrible at relationships. I am too old to begin again, or I have no choice. Words can describe reality, but they also renew an old contract. Every time you say, this is who I am, is worth asking you whether you are describing your essence or defending an adaptation. Instead of saying, I cannot ask for help, you might say, asking for help is uncomfortable for me, but I'm learning. That statement does not deny the difficulty. It leaves room for growth. The second agreement invites us to not take everything personally. When we break an old rule, someone may react. When you break an old rule, someone may react. A relative may say, you've changed. A coworker may be surprised that you are no longer available for every request. A friend may not like your new boundary. You should listen carefully because feedback can reveal a blind spot. However, another person's disappointment does not automatically prove that you are doing something wrong. Sometimes people experience your growth as rejection because the former arrangement worked well for them. The spiritual question becomes, is this response showing me something I genuinely need to examine, or is it revealing that the relationship must now adjust? You may remain humble without surrendering your inner authority. We're always understanding through each reaction around us and within us. How do we grow from the experience? What are we learning from it? That's the soul wants to continue to evolve. That's important to the soul. But usually we don't even think about the soul. And we only think about the day-to-day life. But I'm inviting you and all on my podcast and these episodes to look at life from a different vantage point. Now, getting back to my thoughts here, the third agreement asks us not to make assumptions. Many invisible rules survive because they are never tested. You assume that if you say no, the relationship will be damaged. You assume that if you tell the truth, your family will reject you. You assume that if you slow down, everything will fall apart. Or you assume that if you are no longer needed, you will no longer matter. But have you tested that belief in your present life? Some assumptions were formed from a 7-year-old's interpretation of what mattered. That child may have been observant, but she did not have all the information. Adult spiritual maturity requires you to revisit the conclusion. You can ask, what else might have been true? Is this person the same as the person from my past? Is this situation actually unsafe, or is it simply unfamiliar? What present-day evidence supports the rule I'm still following? The final agreement is to always do your best. For women who learned to earn love through effort, this teaching can easily become another demand. Your best does not mean the most you can force yourself to give before collapsing. Your best changes with your health, responsibilities, capabilities, emotional needs, the season of life, and spiritual priorities. Some days your best is taking action. Some days your best is telling the truth. Some days your best is allowing the words to remain unfinished. Some days your best is refusing to carry what belongs to another adult. Doing your best should deepen integrity. It should not reward self-neglect. Think about an era in your life where you repeatedly experienced resentment, guilt, pressure, anxiety, or emotional exhaustion. Perhaps this pattern appears at work. Perhaps it appears in your family, in your relationship. Perhaps it comes strongest whenever you try to rest, speak honestly, ask for support, or make the choice that others may not understand or agree with. Complete this sentence. I seem to be living as though I must fill in the blank. Your answer may be that you must keep everyone happy, never appear weak, earn your place, remain productive, stay loyal, even when something is harming you, proving that leaving was the right decision, or avoid depending on anyone. Do not make the answer sound spiritual or impressive. Simply tell the truth. Then ask yourself what the rule once helped me receive or avoid. Perhaps it helped you receive praise. Perhaps it reduced conflict. Perhaps it gave you security. Perhaps it gave you safety, identity, approval, or belonging. Perhaps it protected you from rejection. Take a moment to acknowledge the intelligence of the younger version of you. You might say, I understand why I learned this. It helped me navigate what I could not control. Then ask what the rule is costing you now at this stage in your life. It is costing you rest, honesty, intimacy, creativity, joy, health, or the opportunity to be fully known, or the awareness that your soul is seeking greater freedom from these unconscious rules that does not allow you to fully express being your best self. So is it keeping you from making a decision that fits the life you have now? Finally, create a new commitment. The new commitment should not be an act of rebellion. It should be grounded in truth and responsibility. If the old rule says, I must keep everyone happy, your new commitment might be, I will treat people with care, but I will not make their emotional comfort the measure of my goodness. If the old rule was, must never need anyone, your new commitment might become, I will remain capable while allowing trustworthy people to support me. If the old rule says, you must always be productive, you might choose, I will honor meaningful effort and restorative rest. If the old rule says, I must not disappoint my family, you might choose, I will listen respectfully to them and those that I love while remaining responsible for the life I am called to live. Then choose one small action that gives your new commitment a body. You might express a preference without apologizing. You might accept an offer of help. You might tell someone that does not work for me. You might allow another adult to experience the natural consequences of their own decision. You might share what you usually hide behind the words, "I'm fine." Freedom becomes believable through practice. By being honest and telling someone your honest and truthful view about something, it helps to free your soul and being in tune with that intuition of your soul that is tied to your Christ self, that is tied to the I am present, the God source, the higher source, to help you to flow and be in the ever-present right space, right time, understanding, helping others as you need to, but also helping yourself to continue to grow. The first time you break an old rule, you may feel guilty. The second time, you may still feel uncomfortable. However, over time, your inner life begins to learn that no one is pushing you, that you are still worthy, that the relationship may survive, and that you are allowed to choose differently. The sole invitation for this episode, for you to ponder and to think about, is to recognize the rules that once helped you belong, release those that now require you to betray yourself, and choose commitment that reflect your present spiritual truth. Some rules help us survive. Some help our family survive. Some even develop strengths within you that you may still value today. You do not have to hate an old rule in order to release it. You can appreciate what it once did for you and then gently say, "You do not have to direct my life anymore." You're saying it gently, you're saying it firmly, and you're moving to releasing it. This old, unwritten pattern. Perhaps you are not stuck because you are incapable of changing. Perhaps an old habit of you still believes that breaking the rule will cost you love, belonging, approval, or safety. That part of you does not need shame. It needs new evidence. It needs to experience that you can ask for help and still be capable. Say no and still be loving. Make a different choice and still belong. And allow someone else to misunderstand you without abandoning yourself. Remember Claire, who discovered that receiving help did not make for a burden. Remember Renee, who learned that discernment did not require her to close every door. And remember the people in the wilderness who had to discover that leaving captivity and feeling free did not happen at the same moment. Sometimes the chains are removed before the rules leave the mind. As you move through this week, notice the moments when your response feels automatic. Pause and ask yourself, what rule am I obeying right now? Whose voice first taught it to me? What has following this rule cost me? What would my soul choose in this moment? You may have learned the rule before you were old enough to question it, but you are allowed to question it now. You are allowed to examine its purpose. You are allowed to keep the wisdom and release the fear. You are allowed to become a woman your childhood could not yet imagine. Something to think about. Bye for now. And you can find my Mastering Life's Adventures on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, and at Doctor, which is Dr. Judith, MLA.com.
Thank you for joining me for this episode on Mastering Life's Adventures, being your best self through soul evolution. If you have enjoyed what you've heard today, I would be delighted if you would share this episode with others, leave a thumbs up, and subscribe to my Mastering Life's Adventures podcast. Look forward to your joining the next episode. Please leave any comments or suggestions you might have below. Bye for now.